Howdy folks, Johnny here with the Teutonic Church of Jesus Christ, and I wanted to just take some time to answer a few questions that we've been having, and there's a lot of questions coming in about Teutonic theology, and we want to make it available to everyone who is interested in it. We have actually an entire 3-volume set of it's an entire systematic theology. It's something that we've never really had in the movement before within the identity community. There's never been a codified systematic theology written. I mean, every other type of theology within the evangelical community has its own systematic theology, and they bantered these back and forth in the seminaries that, where they train the young pastors and reverends to go on into their Judeo-Christian ministries. Now, we're not a Judeo-Christian church. We're a traditional Christian church. However, we do hold to regular 2,000-year-old theology as you'd find it in the words of the Bible, in the New Testament, in the Old Testament, cover to cover. We believe it all. However, some of our constituents in the Judeo-Christian community, they do not hold to all of it from cover to cover. And I would challenge anybody in a Judeo-Christian church to read the book of Ezra and then go ask your pastor what that means to him. He's not going to have an answer for you. However, we can take all of these prophecies, fulfillments, promises, the law, the grace, all of it. We have all of that heritage as ours, as Western Christians. So the basis of Teutonic theology is that we have a promise from God, which is, this is different from your traditional identity theology in that identity theology is really only 100 years old, if that, because it began with British Israel theory in the late 1890s or so, which was written by a British fella who really didn't know much about his tribal history. He said that the British people, the English, were the descendants of the 10 lost tribes of Israel who were banished from the land and taken away with hooks in their noses by the Assyrians around 722 BC, and that this became the basis of the English stock. However, they also said that in the church of, Philadelphian church, there's a weird church out there that still ascribes to this part of it. They say that the Germans, however, across the water, they were evil, and they're descended from the Assyrians who took them captive. If you look at any European history, you'll find that Saxony is still the largest state in Western Germany, and that's who inhabited the British Isles, was the Anglo-Saxons. The Angles, the Jutes, the Saxons, they were all Germanic tribes. They were all Teutonic. And they came across the channel to displace some of the Celtic tribes and set up England in the south, while the Celts remained in the north in Scotland and in Wales and also in Ireland. But anyway, long story short, it just doesn't jive with history, nor does the idea that identity still holds, that we are descended from these Hebrew tribes, these Israelite tribes that were dispersed from the Promised Land in 722 BC. Okay, we may have absorbed them as an older gene stock, an older European Aryan population, but we don't have our entire basis upon that for origin, because prior to 722 BC, Homer, a Greek, had already written the Iliad, which described the Trojan War between the Aryan Greeks and the Aryan Thracians, whose capital city at the time was Troy. Now, this was said to be mythology for many centuries, until somebody followed the Iliad and followed the cues and the clues, and they dug it up and found it. Found swastikas on the shields and on the walls and on the bucklers. They found all these symbols of our people buried there in the stone. Now, this is a war which happened between European peoples prior to the 10 lost tribes having been ejected from the land. So, you will also find in gene studies in Europe, in European populations, you'll find between 2 and 5%, some more, some less, but you'll find a small percentage of Semitic gene markers in European populations. This implies that these 10 lost tribes may have been absorbed by a larger and older European population, and that's what we teach happened. By absorbing that population, we also absorbed whatever promises that they carried in their blood, and whatever entitlements they may have had as a covenant people. But we were already a covenant people, and we can show this from Genesis chapter 9, verse 27, where Japheth, one of the three sons of Noah, the arch-ancestor of the white European race, and not just in Europe, but wherever it may be found, because we're finding our ancestors' bones and mummies everywhere with blonde hair and cultural artifacts which denote that they were of European stock, of the same tribal stock as us. Also linguistically, all over the world we are finding these artifacts. In Genesis 9:27, God tells Japheth, not God, but through Noah prophesied over Japheth in God's name, since he was a prophet of the Lord and also a priest. He actually gave a blood sacrifice on a burnt offering at an altar that he built. So he prophesied over Japheth, may the Lord extend the territory of Japheth, may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his slave. That first part is territorial imperative. That second part has to do with absorbing the promises and the covenants of Shem, and to dwell under the same tents. That has to do with promises, and it also implies a certain level of intermarriage, which happened when the 10 lost tribes did get absorbed into Europe. And so we hold this to be true. However, do we base our spiritual heritage and covenant off of the Abrahamic covenant of Genesis chapter 11 or 12? No. We start in Genesis 9. Because even Paul himself in Galatians chapter 3 says that since the promises are older than the law, that the promises of grace supersede the law, which is why we have the grace under the New Testament, because it was always written into the law before the law was codified. So basically he lays down a principle of legal precedence. So if Abraham's promise matters and set his gene stock in a certain direction prophetically, and in a certain destiny of nationhood, well then how much more so our older promise, 2 chapters and several hundred years older, in Japheth. So we're exploring the cultural similarities between our ancestral lore, our mythologies, and you will find that there are very startling similarities which would prove in fact that not only Noah but also Japheth had the gift of prophecy and passed these stories down, these stories about the future yet to come. Ragnarok and the Gog and Magog invasion at the end of Revelation, they're the same thing with the same timeline. Only the anthropomorphic names of the bad guys have been changed. That's it. So, that's how we differ. We are a Eurocentric church with a Eurocentric identity theology rather than a Judeo-centric identity theology, because at the end of the day, none of us identify with being Jewish. None of us want to be Jews. We were not born Jews, and we do not have a Jewish identity. No, we're 100% modern-day European, wherever you may find us. This is our heritage. This is our destiny, and this is our future. If you'd like to learn more about the Teutonic Church, or more about Teutonic theology, feel free to inbox me, and if you can give us your email address, we have the first 2 chapters of the first volume in digital format, and we can email this to you for your study. It's basically, the first chapter is a condensed overview, and each item that appears in this first chapter will also be covered later on in an entire chapter of its own and covered in more detail. So any of you that would like to get in on this and learn more about this, feel free to inbox me, and we do have a team also. We have a team of clergy, shall we say. We do have some ministers here who you can talk to, and especially if they're in your area. We'd like to put you in contact if you'd like to join the church, or if you'd like to establish a local church or a local Bible study. We'd also like to train young pastors everywhere around this country. We would like to regain the foothold that we have lost in the evangelical church. We would like to get people in the pews in their mainstream churches talking about these things that we would like to bring up. Why is no one obeying the Bible anymore? We used to have anti-miscegenation laws in this country because they were based on the Bible. So obedient Christians still do not practice miscegenation, but we're called a lot of bad names. But Jesus did say that we would be reviled by men for his name's sake, particularly in these last days. But if your struggle is our struggle and our fight is your fight, feel free to join the church. Even if you're already a member, of a political organization, you can still be a nominal member of the church, because this is just a church. The only time we ask for members to be members of the church only is if they become ministers. We expect full dedication from our ministers. I am only a member of the church. I'm a minister here. I'm here for you guys, here to serve you guys and serve this movement and my people any way that I can. So those of us that have taken that vow, we're only members of the church. But everyone else, the public at large, rank and file church members, are more than free to come and study with us. Stay a member of your local church. Keep going to your local church every Sunday. But come with us and learn. Come with us and learn how you can challenge the ideas of Babylonian religion that are now masquerading as Christianity in Western civilization today, and how you can challenge these concepts in your local church, and if you can, save a few and snatch them from the fire. But that's all we've got for today, but feel free to get at me, and God bless y'all. Love you.